Hi, it's Wendy. Thanks for joining me. Today I'll be demonstrating how to make the Drops Design Sundance socks. These are a great short summer sock and a nice lace pattern. If you've never made lace socks before, just follow along with me and we'll walk through it step by step. I do have permission to demonstrate Drops Design patterns on my channel, but not to show the entire pattern on the screen. So you will need to download this pattern for yourself using the link in the description or on the screen. Make sure that you pick the right language selection for you. In this case, I picked English US to get the appropriate instructions for me to follow. Drops Design uses yarn groups. In this case, you'll need a yarn group A, which is a sock weight or fingering weight yarn. I will not be using Drops yarn in this case, but if you are, it's Drops Flora from Garn Studio. You'll need 50 grams for the two smaller sizes and 100 grams for the largest size, and you will need 2.5 millimeter knitting needles. In this case, I'm going to use a pair of short circular needles. You can work with 4 needles if you want, or a long circular needle and the magic loop method. But I will be working in my favorite method, which is 2 short circulars. The pattern starts with a bunch of different tips, and we will get back to each of those as they come up in the pattern. But the pattern itself starts where it says sock at the bottom of the second page, the way that I printed it out. Here's the sock that I finished already. It's worked from the top down, so we're going to start with a cast on around the top of the cuff here and work down to the toe. You can use any kind of stretchy cast on that you like, such as a long tail cast on. For socks, I really prefer the German twisted cast on. It's a bit tricky to do, but it's really attractive and quite stretchy and works really well for socks. So I encourage you to give it a try. The German twisted cast on, I like to start with a slip stitch on my needle and a long tail. I put the tail on the side facing me and the side that's on the ball I put away from me. Then put your finger and your thumb in between the two pieces of yarn. Grab with your fingers around the strands like that and open up your finger and thumb in kind of a slingshot like that. So I hold on to this slip knot with my finger so it doesn't fly off the end of my needle. Tip my thumb away from me, put my point of my needle under both strands like so. Then into the middle of the strand, so pointing toward my thumb into the middle. Swing it around the front, go over top of the strand that's coming from my finger, tip my thumb down and put the needle back through. Drop it off of the thumb and snug it up. Let's look at that again. Tip up the thumb, scoop under both sides, and then back into the middle, around the front, over top of the one on my finger, and put it back through like so. If you're finding this too complicated, go ahead and use a different method, but again, give it a try because it does make a really nice cast on, and once you get the hang of it, it's not nearly so complicated as it looks. So under both strands on the thumb, scoop them up, then go into the middle, over the top of the right one, scoop it up, and go back into that loop like so. Drop it off of the thumb and snug it up, leaving a little bit of room between each stitch. Under both, around to the middle, flip around, pick up the top of the one on the finger, and sometimes I'll kind of tip my thumb down like that so I can see that loop better. drop it and pull it through. Under both, into the middle, swing around the front, and you can see I kind of twist my hand back to scoop off the one that's coming from my finger, back into the center, and drop the one on the thumb. And it makes quite a nice cast on like that. I'm making the largest size, so I'm going to cast on 63 stitches in this manner. I'll come back when that's done. When your cast on is finished, you'll have 54 stitches for the smaller two sizes and 63 for the larger one, but all of my stitches are on one needle, and I need half of them to be on this other needle. So I'm going to transfer 33 stitches over to my other needle, just picking them up one at a time. I find it easier to do this way than to try and cast on to two needles. It's simpler to cast onto one and then transfer the stitches over one at a time. For the smaller two sizes, you'll want to put 27 stitches on each needle. If you're working with 4 needles or 3 plus 1 in your hand, I would recommend dividing it into 3 sections, but try and keep a multiple of 3 on each needle so that when you're doing the ribbing, it's just a little easier to keep track. Okay, so I've got half of my stitches on each needle, and I'm making sure that they're not twisted, that I'm going to be able to continue round and round without getting a Mobius loop. My working yarn is on the needle that's further away from me, and I'm going to be working half of the stitches at a time, going around and around and around. If you don't like double pointed needles, try this 2 circular needle strategy. I think you'll like it. So the pattern says to knit the first round before we start the ribbing. So what I'm going to do is, with this needle that's at the front, I'm going to push the stitches to the end of that needle ready to be worked, pick up the other end of the same needle, and I'm going to work them off of one end of the needle onto the other end of the same needle, while the other needle just hangs in behind. So knit every stitch in this round, making sure to pull this first one up so that there's no gap where you're joining your round. It's a little awkward. You feel like you need an extra hand at first, but after the first couple of rounds, it gets easier to hang on to. So knit across all of the stitches on this front needle. Until you get to the end of that first needle, then pull it so that the stitches are on the cable in the middle. Flip around, and now we're going to work on the stitches on the second needle. And again, push your needle until the stitches are ready to work. Pick up the other end of the same needle and knit all of the stitches. That will complete the first round. With the second half of the round done, again, pull the stitches to the middle of the cable, flip it like you're turning the page of a book, and you'll notice there's a little bit of a strand in between, but that's just because the cable is smaller than the needle, and it'll take care of itself later. Okay, so one knit round is done. Now we're going to start the ribbing. It's a knit 1, purl 2 ribbing. And that's why I said to do a multiple of 3 stitches on your needle, because then you'll end up with a full repeat of knit 1, purl 2. So again, pushing the stitches on the first needle and picking up the other end of the same needle, knit 1, purl 2. Knit 1, purl 2. And repeat that sequence across this first needle. Then flip around to the second needle and repeat that same sequence. Then continue round and round, doing your ribbing for, what does it say, 2 or 3 centimeters. So 3 centimeters for this larger size. For me, that's about 9 rows. A little tip for when you're flipping from one needle to the other, make sure that your working yarn is underneath the back needle. If you accidentally put it over top like this and then start working with the front needle, you're going to end up creating an extra stitch. So make sure that it's in front of the back needle when you get started on the next half of the row. Continue working in the round for 2 or 3 centimeters depending on your size. Then the pattern says to knit 1 round where you decrease 3 stitches evenly on round. Read the decrease tip. So if we go back to the information for the pattern near the beginning of the pattern, decrease tip says to work out how to decrease evenly, count the total number of stitches on the needle and divide by the number of decreases. So in this case, I have 63 stitches. I need to decrease by 3 according to the pattern. 63 divided by 3 is 21. So every 21 stitches I have to go down by a stitch. So I'm going to knit 19 and then knit 2 together and repeat that twice more. And just for your information, I have 9 rows in my ribbing here. So this will be the 10th round. Again, slide your needle over and knit around, making those decreases. So I have my first 19 stitches done. I'm going to knit stitches number 20 and 21 together by going under both of them, like so, and knitting them into one stitch. Then another 19 and 2 together. And then repeat one more time. The next round calls for a little bit of rearranging of the stitches so that your join from your very first round ends up at the back of the heel. The next round is worked as follows: knit 45, then place the last 30 stitches worked on a thread for the mid top of the foot. I'm actually going to put those 30 stitches on a stitch holder rather than a thread, but either one will work. All right, so I've gotten to 45 stitches, which took me across the first needle and halfway across the second needle. And the pattern says to put the last 30 stitches I just did onto a thread, or in this case, a stitch holder. So I'm just going to pick them off of there carefully. You should have 15 stitches left on this second needle that you didn't work. Okay, so I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 so far. So I need another 14 from the first needle. Just scooch them to the end there and carefully transfer them over. Okay, So 30 on my stitch holder. You might have 20 if you're making the smaller sizes. Make sure you've got the outside of the sock to the outside. Don't let it turn inside out on you. Okay, so this part on the stitch holder is going to be the front of the sock, okay? Going down the top of the foot. And now I'm going to be working on the last 15 stitches here. The pattern says to knit the remaining 15. All right, so I have 15 stitches here, and the rest of them on the placeholder for the top of the sock. Now the pattern says to work stocking stitch back and forth over the heel stitches for 6 centimeters. So these 30 here are the heel stitches. And I'm going to transfer them all to one needle. So I'll just set this one aside for now. And stocking stitch is knit on the right side and purl on the wrong side. So I'll knit across the rest of this row because this is the outside or the right side of the sock. It says insert a marker in the middle of the row, and the piece is going to be measured from the marker. So I'll put my marker around a stitch, just all the way around it, like that, in the middle of the row. At this point, instead of continuing in the round, I'm going to turn the work and work back and forth on the one needle on the heel stitches. So now I'm going to work the 6 centimeters until from the marker, and that will make the heel. Now there is a knitting tip for strengthening the heel, which involves working with 2 strands. So you would use one strand, switch to the other strand, go back to the first strand, and it would strengthen the heel. I'm just going to do a plain stockinette stitch. So knit on the outside and purl on the inside across these 30 stitches until I reach the length indicated on the pattern. All right, with 6 centimeters finished, or the length required for your size, and with the right side facing for the next row, we're ready to go on to the next step, which is the heel decrease. It says insert one marker in the middle of the row to measure from this point. So we're going to move this marker up, put it in the middle of the row around one of the stitches, and that's our new point to measure from. Then work heel decrease, see description. So we'll go back to the information for the pattern section again, where it says heel decrease. Row 1, right side, knit until there are 8 or 9 stitches left. So for my size it's 9, for the small and medium size it's 8. That's what those dashes mean. 8, 8, 9 means small, medium, large. So knit until there are 9 stitches left, slip the next stitch as if to knit, knit 1, pass the slipped stitch over the knitted stitch and turn. Here's what that looks like. I'm going to knit across until I have 9 stitches left on my left hand needle. Okay, that's 9 left on my left needle. Then slip the next stitch as if to knit. So put your needle in the front just as if you're going to knit, but slide that stitch right off the end of the left hand needle. Then knit 1, pass the slipped stitch over top, and we're going to stop there and turn and go back. Row 2 on the wrong side, purl until there are 9 stitches left. Then slip the next stitch as if to purl. So scoop the stitch from the back to the front as if to purl, slide it off the left hand needle, purl 1, and scooping it up from the back, take that slipped stitch and put it over top of that purl stitch. Now turn, then knit until there are 8 stitches left, or 7 if you're working the smaller sizes. So 8 stitches left is going to mean the ones that you left behind the last time plus 1 more. Again, slip as if to knit, knit 1, pass the slipped stitch over. And in case you're wondering, yes, that is the same thing as a slip, slip, knit. So you could just do that. Same thing on the other side, purl across until there are 8 stitches left. So that should give you, again, the ones you left behind plus 1 more. You'll notice that there's a bit of a gap in between from where you put the 2 stitches together the last time. Slip the purl stitch, purl the next one, slip the purled one over. And that is effectively the same as a purl 2 together. So feel free to do that if you find that easier. For the next row, knit until there is 1 less stitch. So last time I knit until there were 8 left. This time I'll knit until there are 7 left. On the return row, I'll purl until there are 7 left. Then the next knit row, I'll knit until there are 6 left. So you just decrease 1 each time in that manner. Each time, go until you get to that stitch just before the gap. And put those 2 together by slipping and then putting the slip stitch over top. And you'll find that your heel decrease will look like that each time you're decreasing on either side, and you get that nice heel shaping like so. Continue to decrease in that way until you have 16 stitches for a small or medium and 14 stitches for a large. The last row of your heel decrease should be a wrong side row, and you should be picking up the last of the side stitches and have the number on your needle that corresponds with the number in the pattern. In my case, that is 14. Now we're going to continue by turning back to the outside. Knit the 14 stitches from the heel and then pick up stitches along the side of the heel here. So for this size, I need to pick up 16 stitches. Then I'll knit the stitches off of my placeholder at the front here and pick up more stitches down this side. I've knitted across the 14 stitches at the bottom of the heel, and now I need to pick up 16 along the side of the heel, like so. And you can pick them up ahead of time like this, or just pick them up one at a time as you go, but just try and make them even along the side of the heel. So I counted, I only had 15, so I need to pick up one more at the end here. Now I'm going to transfer these stitches from my stitch holder back on to my second needle that I had set aside to do the heel. Then picking up the other end of that same needle, knit across those stitches as well. Then, using the other end of the same needle, pick up 16 stitches along the edge of the other side of the heel. So working on the very edge row. In this case, I'm just going to pick them up one at a time, about 2 stitches for every 3 rows. Once you have all those stitches picked up, the pattern lists how many stitches you should have. So take a moment and count all of your stitches. For my size, the largest size, I should have 76. For the medium, 64, and the small, 62. So just count all your stitches, make sure you have the right number. And then it says continue by working A1 in the round. At the same time, on the first round, decrease 12, 14, or 16 stitches evenly. Now A1 is the chart, and if you are not familiar with reading charts, let's walk through this a little bit. So there are symbols here on the paper. So an open box, an empty box means knit. A circle in the box or a dot means purl. This symbol that looks like an oval with a line down the middle, that says between 2 stitches make 1 yarn over, and this big solid triangle is a knit 3 together, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. So our first row of the repeat is all empty boxes. So that means we're going to knit every stitch in this round. Then in the next round, we're going to purl every stitch, then knit every stitch, then purl every stitch. And that will give you this kind of a design here. You can see I have a knit row, or round rather, and then a purl round, a knit round, and a purl round. Then we go into this lacy section here. So on the pattern it says at the same time, so on this first knit round, we have to decrease so that we have a multiple of 10. And we're going to repeat those 10 stitches over and over going around. So for the large size, I need to get down to 60 stitches. And for the other 2 sizes, you're going to go down to 50 stitches. So going back to the decrease tip, I have 76 stitches and I need to decrease by 16. So I'm going to divide 76 by 16 and that gives me 4.75, which is not a nice even number, but what it means is that for the most part, every 4 stitches has to turn into 3. So I'll knit stitches 3 and 4 together, and once in a while, every 4th and 5th stitch will get knit together. So decrease the number of stitches evenly around the sock, and then you should end up with 50 or 60. Once you've made your way around, count the total number of stitches and make sure that it's right. If you find that you have to go back and give it another try, that's fine. You just have to pick your stitches out again. I'll show you right here how to do that. So I'm going to slide the stitches to near the top of my right hand needle, hold my yarn like so, and then just carefully put the needle into the stitch. So I'll show you here. See how this V is underneath this loop? Put your needle in the back of that V, hang on to it, and slide the stitch off, and you can pull it out like so. So just pick them off one by one if you need to. If you get to one where there's a double stitch, put your needle under both of them, grab them again, and then you can go back to where you need to and just redo it. All right, so I've got 60. they're not evenly divided on the needles. So I would like to have a multiple of 10 on each needle just to make that repeat easier. So I'm going to shift my stitches around so that I have 30 on each needle. On this first needle I have 23, so I'm just going to move 7 over. Okay, now there's 30 on each, and that will make following this chart much easier. So go back to where the yarn is at the end of this needle. Push that one through so that it's ready to work. There we go, got a little tangly. All right, put that one back out of the way. Again, making sure that my yarn is not going to go over top of the cable like that and accidentally make an extra stitch. Okay, I want to make sure it's in front of the cable so that when I work these stitches, it goes straight across. Pick up the other end of the same needle. And this is going to be the start of my second round. And remember we said the second round is a purl round because it has those filled in circles on it. And I want to make sure that I remember that this is the start of my round every time. So I'm going to take a stitch marker and put it in the stitch just below where I'm starting. So each time I get back around to my stitch marker, I'll know it's time to start a new round. It can be easy to get confused when you're using 2 needles like this and accidentally start it at the wrong half of the sock. So putting my yarn in front because I'm going to purl every stitch around for round number 2 on the A1 chart. I hope you're enjoying this project so far, and if it's your first pair of socks, congratulations on getting this far. This is not an easy project to do if you don't have a lot of knitting experience with socks, so well done. Round 2 is all done. You can see that nice row of purl bumps there. Round 3 again is a knit round, and then round 4 is a purl round. So I'm going to do those 2 and then come back. So there's rounds 3 and 4 finished. The next 2 rounds are plain knit rounds, and then we'll start on our lace pattern. So I'll come back after 2 more knit rounds and show you how to do this lace row. All right, so if you're following along, your sock should look like this, and we've done 2, 4, 6 rounds. We're starting on this first lace round. A lot of people find the charts intimidating, but you just take it 1 stitch at a time, and remember we're repeating these 10 stitches 6 times around the sock. So on the first 10, I'm going to do this sequence. Then on the next 10, I'm going to go back to the right hand side, repeat that sequence again. So each time you're reading from right to left for each 10 stitches. So I need to do a knit, a yarn over, and 1, 2, 3 knits. So starting at the beginning of my round, knit, yarn over, so that means wrap the yarn around like so from back to front. But that will create a hole, and then I'll close it again on the next round. 2 and 3. Okay, so knit, yarn over, 1, 2, 3 knits. Now we have this triangle symbol, And the instructions are right here. Slip 1 stitch as if to knit, knit 2 together, pass the slipped stitch over the knitted together stitches. Okay, so with this first stitch, slip it as if to knit, so just put your needle in, slide it right off. Then knit these 2 together by scooping up both of them, wrap and knit, and take that first one and put it over. So we've turned 3 stitches into 1 stitch. Then knit 3 more, and yarn over at the end. So that's the end of my 10 stitch repeat. So I added a stitch with each of the yarn overs. So 2 have been added and 2 have been taken away by turning 3 stitches into 1. Now, as I said, I go back to the beginning of the chart and do that again. So knit 1, yarn over, knit 3, then I have the triangle symbol again, slip 1, knit 2 together, pass the slipped stitch over, knit 3, yarn over. Now for the third time on this side, I'm going to do that same sequence. So knit 1, yarn over, knit 3, slip, put 2 together, slip stitch over top, knit 3, and that's the end of my 30 stitches, and I still need to do that yarn over at the end. So you remember before I told you make sure that your yarn isn't wrapped around the cable, but in this case we have a yarn over, so we do want to keep that there. Turn around, move to the 30 stitches on the other side of the sock, and repeat. Do that sequence 3 times more on this side of the sock. At the end of the round, again finish with the yarn over, flip around to the other needle, and the next round and every other round, so in between the lace rounds, is a knit round. So I'll do a plain knit round, and then on the next round I'll follow this sequence of stitches 6 times or 5 times if you're doing the smaller size. So knit round, and then the next round will be knit, knit, yarn over, knit, knit, this 3 together sequence, knit, knit, yarn over, knit, and repeat. So it's as simple as that. On the plain knit round, when you get to a yarn over, which is going to look like that, simply knit it as usual, and that will give you a little bit of a hole to start your lace pattern. Continue with the chart until you've finished all of these rounds, then start over back at the beginning. And at the end of each round, if you want to make sure that you haven't dropped or gained any stitches, just count, and you should always have 50 or 60 depending on your size. Repeat that sequence for the number of rounds that it takes to get to the length required. So for this one it says work approximately 22 centimeters from the heel marker. Now I only got a total of 4 pattern repeats. I know on the picture it shows 6. Maybe my yarn has just got a little more give, I'm not sure. But from your heel marker, which will be right between where you started the decrease, just put it back in there if you happen to take it out. Measure the distance marked on the pattern. So for my size, it's 22 centimeters, for a small 18 and a medium 20. And then stop, and then we'll do the toe. If you don't have one of these magnetic boards, I'd really recommend picking one up. It's a great way to keep track of which round you're on. So when you have reached the length required in the pattern, give it a measure. But I find that it is tricky to measure because it's so stretchy, and how much do you stretch it out before measuring? Just to try on the sock. So a good rule of thumb, if it fits up to the base of your big toe, if that's how long it is, then we're ready to start the toe section. Now the pattern says to end after a full repeat of the pattern or of the chart. And if it's not quite enough, to just add a few rounds of stockinette stitch. So in my case, I did 4 repeats of the chart sequence, and it still wasn't quite long enough, so I did 3 rows in plain knit. Now we're ready to start the toe. Okay, so the toe is worked on 30 stitches on the bottom of the foot and 30 stitches on the top of the foot, with decreases on either side. But if your needles are set up like mine, they're not quite in the right place. So if I were to flatten this out so that the heel is in the center here, it would be something more like this. So I need to rearrange my stitches a little bit so that I have 30 on the bottom of the foot and 30 on the top. So my strategy for doing that is to look for the center of the heel. Now in this case, that's also the center of these the design here. So I'm just going to follow that up to the top and mark that center point with a stitch marker. So now I know that I need 15 stitches, give or take, on either side of the stitch marker. So I'm just going to go back and shift some stitches over so that I have 15 to the right of my stitch marker here. It's a little awkward, but just scooch them over and even it out. This is the one occasion where it actually is a little easier to use double pointed needles, but that's okay. Okay, that's 15. All right. Now, of course, my start of my round was in the middle, so I'm going to take the other end of the same needle and put those stitches that are already worked back on. So I shifted them to the left-hand needle. Now I'm just putting them back to the right-hand needle so I get back to my starting point. Okay, so that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 in my case. I'm going to keep knitting until I get to 30, and that will be the right number for this side of the foot. So now I have 30 stitches on either side of the sock for the front and the back. The pattern then says to put a marker marking the beginning and end of the toe, so on either side, and we're going to decrease either side of those markers to make this nice decrease going up either side of the toe. The pattern says to look at decrease tip number 2. So go back to the notes at the beginning. Decrease tip number 2 says that in the last 2 stitches, knit those together, and in the first two, slip one, knit one, pass the slipped one over. Do the same thing on the other side so that you have a total of 4 decreases on that round. Then it says to repeat that decrease every second round 6 or 7 times, depending on your size, then every round 3 or 4 times. The in-between rounds will just be plain stocking stitch. So I'm going to, on this round, do 4 decreases, then do a plain round, then 4 decreases, then a plain round, and so on. So that looks like this. In these first 2 stitches after the marker, slip one, knit one, pass the slipped stitch over, knit across the rest of that needle, or across the first half of the stitches if you're using double pointed needles. When you get to the last 2 stitches before the marker, knit those together by scooping both of them up and knitting them into one. Turn to the other side and repeat, decreasing on the first 2 and the last 2 stitches. For the second round and every even numbered round of the toe, knit every stitch around. Then repeat a decrease round, a stockinette round, a decrease round, and a stockinette round until you've reached the number of decreases the pattern indicates. So in my case, if I'm going to get to a total of 7 decrease rounds, then I will have 14 less stitches on each side. So I will know that I get to the right number when I have 16 out of the 30 stitches left. The majority of the toe is finished after 7 decrease rounds and 7 plain rounds. Now the pattern says to do 3 or 4 decrease rounds in a row. And that will bring me down to a total of 16 stitches, 8 on each needle. When the 6 or 7 every other row decreases and the 3 or 4 every row decreases are complete, the next instruction says, knit all stitches together 2 and 2 on the next round. So that simply means to put 2 together all the way around. So I'm going to knit 2 together for 8 stitches on this side and 2 together on the other side. So I'll have 4 left on each side. And then we'll cut the strand and pull it through the rest of the stitches and cinch it tight to close the toe. Then simply work in your ends and your beautiful Sundance socks will be finished. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful and that you'll enjoy wearing or gifting these beautiful socks. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.